Question 1. The investigation demonstrates that the admissions committee for the Akdeniz University entrance exam is considering several methods for evaluating candidate applications. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical standards for university admissions in Turkey, ensuring a fair and merit-based selection process? Option A. A multi-stage review process where each application is independently assessed by at least 2 faculty members using predefined scoring rubrics, with a final review by a committee to address any significant discrepancies. Option B. Relying primarily on the subjective first impression of the lead admissions officer, who has extensive experience in evaluating applications. Option C. Prioritizing candidates who demonstrate strong connections to influential alumni or significant financial contributions to the university. Option D. Allowing the admissions committee to adjust the weighting of evaluation criteria based on the perceived quality of the applicant pool as it emerges. The correct answer is A. A multi-stage review process where each application is independently assessed by at least 2 faculty members using predefined scoring rubrics, with a final review by a committee to address any significant discrepancies. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the need to provide a fair and transparent admissions process. The pressure to admit a high number of qualified students, coupled with the potential for subjective interpretation of application materials, necessitates a robust and ethically sound process. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions are based on objective criteria and are free from bias or undue influence. The correct approach, which involves a multi-stage review process with clear, predefined criteria and independent evaluation, represents best professional practice. This method aligns with the principles of fairness and due process expected in academic admissions. Specifically, the regulatory framework for university entrance exams in Turkey, as overseen by YOUMLAUTK, Council of Higher Education, emphasizes meritocracy and equal opportunity. A structured review process ensures that all candidates are assessed against the same standards, minimizing the risk of arbitrary decisions. The involvement of multiple reviewers also provides checks and balances, reducing the likelihood of individual bias impacting the outcome. This systematic approach is crucial for maintaining the credibility of the Akdeniz University entrance exam and upholding the trust placed in the institution by prospective students and the wider academic community. An approach that relies solely on the initial impression of a single admissions officer is professionally unacceptable. This method fails to adhere to the principles of due process and fairness, mandated by YOUMLAUTK regulations. It introduces a high risk of subjective bias, as one individual's personal preferences or preconceptions could unduly influence the assessment of a candidate. Such a process lacks transparency and accountability, making it difficult to challenge or review decisions. An approach that prioritizes candidates based on their perceived social or economic status, rather than academic merit, is a direct violation of the equal opportunity principles enshrined in Turkish higher education law. This introduces an unethical element of discrimination into the admissions process, undermining the integrity of the entrance exam. It also fails to comply with YOUMLAUTK guidelines that stress the importance of merit-based selection. An approach that allows for last-minute changes to evaluation criteria without proper documentation or justification is also professionally unacceptable. This lack of standardization and transparency creates an environment where decisions can appear arbitrary and potentially manipulated. It deviates from the established regulatory requirements for consistent and auditable admissions processes, which are designed to prevent unfair advantages or disadvantages. Professionals in university admissions should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, fairness, and adherence to established regulations. This involves clearly defining evaluation criteria before the review process begins, ensuring that these criteria are applied consistently to all applicants, and implementing a multi-stage review system with checks and balances. Documentation of all decisions and the rationale behind them is essential for accountability and potential appeals. Regular training on ethical considerations and regulatory compliance is also vital for maintaining the integrity of the admissions process. Question 2. The analysis reveals that the Akdeniz University Admissions Office is experiencing significant delays in processing applicant information for the upcoming entrance examination, leading to concerns about candidate experience and administrative burden. To address this, a proposal has been made to implement a new, automated applicant screening tool that promises faster processing times. However, the tool has not been fully vetted against the specific procedural requirements outlined in the Akdeniz University Entrance Exam Regulations, nor has its impact on the fairness of candidate evaluation been rigorously assessed. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of process optimization while adhering to the regulatory framework of the Akdeniz University Entrance Exam? Option A. Prioritize the implementation of the new tool based on its perceived speed, and then retroactively seek approval from relevant university committees, while informing applicants that the process may be subject to change due to system upgrades. Option B. Focus on streamlining the manual review process by hiring additional temporary staff, as this approach avoids the complexities and potential risks associated with introducing new technology, thereby ensuring adherence to existing, well-understood procedures. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of the current admissions workflow, identify specific bottlenecks, and then research and pilot test automated tools that demonstrably meet the fairness and transparency requirements stipulated in the Akdeniz University Entrance Exam Regulations before full implementation. Option D. Immediately deploy the proposed automated screening tool to expedite processing, assuming that faster processing inherently improves the overall efficiency and candidate experience, and address any compliance issues that may arise later. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough review of the current admissions workflow, identify specific bottlenecks, and then research and pilot test automated tools that demonstrably meet the fairness and transparency requirements stipulated in the Akdeniz University Entrance Exam Regulations before full implementation. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's need for efficient resource allocation with the ethical obligation to provide a fair and transparent admissions process. The pressure to optimize processes can sometimes lead to shortcuts that compromise integrity. Careful judgment is required to ensure that efficiency gains do not come at the expense of fairness or adherence to Akdeniz University's established entrance examination regulations. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the existing admissions process to identify bottlenecks and areas for improvement, followed by the development and implementation of data-driven solutions that are tested for effectiveness and compliance with Akdeniz University's entrance examination guidelines. This approach is right because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the current system before making changes, ensuring that any modifications are well-informed and aligned with regulatory requirements. Specifically, Akdeniz University's entrance examination regulations emphasize fairness, transparency, and the objective evaluation of candidates. Implementing changes without a comprehensive analysis risks introducing biases or procedural flaws that could violate these principles. A data-driven approach ensures that decisions are based on evidence, minimizing subjective influences and enhancing the reliability of the admissions process, thereby upholding the spirit and letter of the university's examination framework. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement a new, untested software system for applicant screening without a thorough analysis of its compatibility with existing university policies or its potential impact on the fairness of the evaluation. This is ethically unacceptable because it bypasses the due diligence required by Akdeniz University's entrance examination regulations, which mandate a transparent and equitable selection process. Introducing an unvetted system could inadvertently disadvantage certain applicant groups or introduce errors that compromise the integrity of the exam. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed of processing over the accuracy and thoroughness of candidate evaluation. For example, by reducing the number of review stages for applications. This is a regulatory failure, as it directly contradicts the principles of comprehensive assessment and fairness embedded in Akdeniz University's entrance examination guidelines. The goal of the entrance exam is to identify the most suitable candidates, and any process that shortcuts thorough evaluation undermines this objective and violates the spirit of merit-based selection. A third incorrect approach would be to rely solely on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few individuals to redesign the admissions process, without consulting relevant university committees or reviewing the official examination regulations. This is an ethical and regulatory failure, because it disregards the established governance structures and the formal requirements for changes to the entrance examination procedures. Akdeniz University's regulations likely stipulate consultation and approval processes for significant procedural changes, which must be followed to ensure legitimacy and compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the problem or the desired improvement. Second, gather comprehensive data and information about the current process and relevant regulations. Third, brainstorm potential solutions, evaluating each against the established regulatory framework and ethical principles. Fourth, select the most viable solution. Develop a detailed implementation plan and pilot test it if possible. Finally, monitor the implemented solution for effectiveness and compliance, making adjustments as necessary. This systematic and evidence-based approach ensures that process optimization efforts are both effective and ethically sound, adhering strictly to the Akdeniz University entrance exams regulatory framework. Question 3. Process analysis reveals that the Akdeniz University Admissions Department is experiencing significant delays in processing applicant documents for the upcoming entrance exam, leading to increased administrative burden and potential candidate dissatisfaction. To address this, the department is considering several strategies to optimize its workflow. Which of the following strategies best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical considerations for university admissions in Turkey? Option A. Drastically reducing the number of required application documents to speed up processing, without a thorough review of whether these documents are essential for candidate evaluation or for meeting Y/O-Umlaut-K reporting requirements. Option B. Implementing a phased digital transformation of document submission and verification, coupled with a comprehensive risk assessment of each new digital touchpoint to ensure data security and process integrity, while maintaining clear communication channels with applicants regarding any changes. Option C. Delegating the entire document verification process to an external service provider without establishing clear performance metrics, oversight mechanism, or ensuring their adherence to Turkish data protection laws and Y/O-Umlaut-K guidelines. Option D. Adopting the latest applicant tracking software immediately to automate all processing steps, without conducting pilot testing or ensuring compatibility with existing university systems and Y/O-Umlaut-K data exchange protocols. Correct answer is B. Implementing a phased digital transformation of document submission and verification, coupled with a comprehensive risk assessment of each new digital touchpoint to ensure data security and process integrity, while maintaining clear communication channels with applicants regarding any changes. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's administrative efficiency with the ethical obligation to ensure a fair and transparent admissions process for all applicants. The pressure to streamline operations must not compromise the integrity of the entrance exam, which is a cornerstone of academic meritocracy. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement process improvements that are both effective and compliant with Akdeniz University's established regulations and the Yüksekörgüdenim Kurulu (YÖRK) guidelines governing university admissions in Turkey. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the current admissions process to identify bottlenecks and inefficiencies, followed by the development and implementation of targeted solutions that enhance speed and accuracy without introducing bias or compromising security. This approach aligns with the principles of good governance and administrative fairness mandated by Y/O-Umlaut-K regulations, which emphasize transparency, equal opportunity, and the prevention of irregularities in student selection. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit of regulations that aim to ensure that all candidates are evaluated based on objective criteria and that the examination process is conducted in a secure and equitable manner. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on reducing the number of application stages without a thorough risk assessment would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the security and integrity of the admissions process, potentially opening avenues for fraud or unfair advantage, which directly contravenes Y/O-Umlaut-K's directives on maintaining the credibility of university entrance examinations. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the adoption of new technologies without adequate testing and validation would also be professionally unsound. This could lead to system failures, data breaches, or unintended biases in candidate evaluation, violating the ethical duty to protect applicant data and ensure a fair assessment. Such an approach neglects the regulatory requirement for robust and reliable systems in admissions. Furthermore, an approach that involves outsourcing critical examination components to third-party vendors without stringent oversight and due diligence would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This could lead to a loss of control over the examination process, making it difficult to ensure compliance with YOUMLAUT-K standards, and potentially exposing the university to reputational damage and legal repercussions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multi-stakeholder approach, including admissions officers, IT specialists, legal counsel, and academic staff. This team should conduct a comprehensive process mapping exercise, identify key performance indicators, and evaluate potential solutions against regulatory requirements, ethical principles, and the university's strategic objectives. A phased implementation with pilot testing and continuous monitoring is crucial to ensure that process optimizations achieve their intended goals without compromising the fairness and integrity of the admissions process. Question 4. To address the challenge of streamlining the Akdeniz University entrance exam administration process while upholding fairness and integrity, which of the following strategies would best align with the university's regulatory framework and ethical obligations? Option A. Prioritizing the rapid processing of application documents to meet internal deadlines, potentially overlooking minor discrepancies in submitted information. Option B. Reducing the number of invigilators per examination hall to cut down on personnel costs, assuming that most students will adhere to exam rules. Option C. Implementing a new, faster online application system that reduces manual data entry, even if it requires applicants to have specific technical skills not universally possessed by all prospective students. Option D. Conducting a comprehensive review of existing administrative workflows to identify inefficiencies, followed by the development and pilot testing of technology-assisted solutions that enhance accuracy and applicant experience without compromising accessibility or the standardized nature of the exam. The correct answer is D. Conducting a comprehensive review of existing administrative workflows to identify inefficiencies, followed by the development and pilot testing of technology-assisted solutions that enhance accuracy and applicant experience without compromising accessibility or the standardized nature of the exam. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the university's need to optimize resource allocation for entrance exams and the ethical imperative to ensure fairness and transparency for all applicants. The Akdeniz University entrance exam regulations, while not explicitly detailed here, are presumed to prioritize equitable access and a standardized testing environment. Therefore, any process optimization must strictly adhere to these underlying principles, ensuring no applicant is disadvantaged by changes designed for efficiency. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the current examination process, identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies, and proposing solutions that are validated against the Akdeniz University entrance exam regulations and ethical guidelines for fair assessment. This approach prioritizes maintaining the integrity of the exam while exploring avenues for improvement. Regulatory justification would stem from any provisions within the Akdeniz University entrance exam framework that mandate fairness, equal opportunity, and the prevention of bias in the examination process. Ethically, this aligns with principles of justice and non-maleficence, ensuring that the pursuit of efficiency does not compromise the rights or opportunities of any candidate. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering the impact on test administration or applicant experience would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to a reduction in the quality of testing materials, inadequate invigilation, or a rushed testing environment, all of which could violate the spirit and letter of the Akdeniz University entrance exam regulations concerning a fair and standardized assessment. Such an approach would fail to uphold the ethical duty of care towards applicants. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing new technologies without thorough pilot testing or ensuring accessibility for all applicants would also be problematic. This could inadvertently create barriers for certain groups of students, violating principles of equal opportunity and potentially contravening specific regulations within the Akdeniz University entrance exam framework that address accessibility and inclusivity. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of processing applications over accuracy and completeness could lead to errors in candidate registration or examination assignments, undermining the validity of the entire examination process and failing to meet regulatory requirements for accurate record keeping. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multi-stakeholder consultation, including examination administrators, faculty, and potentially student representatives, to understand the full implications of any proposed changes. A risk assessment should be conducted for each proposed optimization, evaluating potential impacts on fairness, accessibility, and the overall integrity of the exam. Finally, any proposed changes must be reviewed and approved by the relevant university authorities responsible for overseeing the Akdeniz University entrance exam, ensuring compliance with all applicable regulations and ethical standards. Question 5. The review process indicates that the current admissions evaluation for the Akdeniz University entrance exam is experiencing significant delays, impacting the timely notification of successful candidates. To address this, several proposals for process optimization have been put forward. Which of the following approaches best balances efficiency gains with the integrity and fairness of the admissions process? Adhering to Akdeniz University's entrance exam guidelines. Option A. Shorten the time allocated for each applicant's review and interview to expedite the overall process. Option B. Significantly reduce the number of evaluators involved in the review process to streamline decision-making. Option C. Implement a fully automated system for evaluating all application components, eliminating human review. Option D. Conduct a thorough analysis of the existing workflow to identify specific bottlenecks and implement targeted technological solutions and standardized protocols for evaluators. The correct answer is B. Significantly reduce the number of evaluators involved in the review process to streamline decision-making. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's need for efficient admissions processing with the ethical obligation to ensure fairness and accuracy for all applicants. The pressure to optimize processes can sometimes lead to shortcuts that compromise integrity. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement improvements that are both effective and compliant with Akdeniz University's entrance exam regulations and general principles of academic integrity. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the existing admissions workflow to identify bottlenecks and areas for improvement, followed by the implementation of targeted changes that enhance efficiency without compromising the validity or fairness of the evaluation. This might include leveraging technology for initial screening, standardizing interview protocols, or improving communication channels. Such an approach aligns with the spirit of academic regulations that aim for a transparent and equitable admissions process. It prioritizes data-driven improvements that are verifiable and can be audited, ensuring that the optimization efforts are robust and defensible. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on reducing the number of evaluators without a corresponding increase in their efficiency or a reevaluation of the assessment criteria risks overlooking critical nuances in applicant profiles. This could lead to a less thorough assessment and potentially unfair outcomes, violating the principle of comprehensive evaluation inherent in university admissions. Another incorrect approach that involves automating the entire evaluation process without human oversight or validation mechanisms fails to account for the subjective elements often present in assessing potential candidates, such as motivation, critical thinking, and unique experiences. This could lead to a depersonalized and potentially biased selection, contravening the university's commitment to holistic review. Furthermore, an approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy, perhaps by shortening the time allocated for reviewing applications or conducting interviews, directly undermines the thoroughness required for a fair admissions process. This haste can result in misjudgments and the overlooking of qualified candidates, which is ethically unacceptable. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the objectives of process optimization in this case, improving admissions efficiency. This understanding must then be weighed against the paramount importance of fairness, accuracy, and compliance with Akdeniz University's specific entrance exam regulations. A structured approach involving data analysis to identify specific problems, brainstorming potential solutions, evaluating these solutions against regulatory requirements and ethical principles, and finally, Piloting and monitoring the implemented changes is crucial. This iterative process ensures that optimization efforts are effective, sustainable, and uphold the integrity of the admissions process. Question 6. What factors determine the optimal balance between ensuring the security and integrity of the Akdeniz University entrance examination and the efficiency of its administrative and logistical processes? Option A. The number of examination centers available across different regions to maximize candidate accessibility, irrespective of the administrative burden. Option B. The extent to which technological solutions are integrated into candidate verification, examination administration, and result processing, alongside clear, standardized protocols for invigilation and candidate management. Option C. The strictness of the penalties imposed on candidates found to be engaging in malpractice, without considering the efficiency of detection. Option D. The reliance on manual record-keeping and paper-based communication to minimize initial technological investment. The correct answer is B. The extent to which technological solutions are integrated into candidate verification, examination administration, and result processing, alongside clear, standardized protocols for invigilation and candidate management. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the practicalities of managing a high-stakes entrance examination. The pressure to ensure a fair and secure process, while also optimizing the efficiency of candidate processing and examination administration, can lead to conflicting priorities. Careful judgment is required to implement procedures that are both robust and manageable within the given resources and timeframe. The correct approach involves a systematic review and refinement of the entire examination process, from candidate registration and verification to invigilation and result tabulation. This process optimization should be guided by the principles of fairness, transparency, and security as enshrined in the Akdeniz University's examination regulations and relevant Turkish higher education directives. Specifically, it requires identifying bottlenecks, potential points of failure, and areas where efficiency can be improved without compromising the integrity of the examination. This might involve leveraging technology for registration and verification, standardizing invigilation protocols, and implementing clear communication channels for candidates and staff. The ethical imperative is to ensure that all candidates have an equal opportunity and that the examination accurately reflects their knowledge and abilities, free from any form of malpractice. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed without considering security measures would be professionally unacceptable. This failure would violate the university's regulations on examination conduct and potentially the principles of fairness, as it could inadvertently create opportunities for cheating or administrative errors that disadvantage candidates. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes stringent security measures to the detriment of candidate experience and accessibility would also be flawed. While security is paramount, overly burdensome or confusing procedures can create undue stress for candidates, potentially impacting their performance and leading to complaints, which would be contrary to the university's aim of facilitating a positive and equitable examination experience. This could also lead to logistical challenges in managing candidate flow and access to examination venues. A third incorrect approach that relies on outdated or manual processes without exploring technological advancements would be inefficient and prone to errors. This would fail to optimize resource allocation and could lead to delays in result processing, impacting the timely admission of successful candidates, which is a key objective of the entrance examination process. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the existing examination process and its objectives. This involves consulting relevant university regulations and national guidelines. Next, they should identify key performance indicators for efficiency and integrity, brainstorming potential improvements, evaluating their feasibility and impact on both efficiency and fairness, and piloting promising changes are crucial steps. Continuous monitoring and feedback mechanisms are essential for ongoing refinement. The ultimate goal is to achieve a process that is both secure and efficient, upholding the academic standards and reputation of Akdeniz University. Question 7. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a candidate preparing for the Akdeniz University entrance exam has encountered conflicting information regarding the permissibility of bringing a personal calculator. The candidate recalls that in previous academic settings, certain types of calculators were allowed. However, the official Akdeniz University Entrance Exam Guidelines, which are the sole governing document for this examination, are silent on the specific model of calculator, but emphasize that only approved electronic aids are permitted, with the definition of approved being exclusively determined by the examination board. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the candidate to ensure compliance with the Akdeniz University Entrance Exams Regulatory Framework? Option A. Contact the Akdeniz University Admissions Office or the Examination Board directly to obtain a definitive list of approved electronic aids or clarification on calculator policy. Option B. Bring a high-end graphing calculator, reasoning that if it is not explicitly banned, it should be allowed and it might offer an advantage. Option C. Rely on the advice of a peer who claims to have successfully used a similar calculator in a previous Akdeniz University entrance exam. Option D. Assume that a standard scientific calculator, commonly allowed in other university entrance exams, is permissible as the guidelines do not explicitly forbid it. Correct answer is D. Assume that standard scientific calculator, commonly allowed in other university entrance exams, is permissible as the guidelines do not explicitly forbid it. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for a candidate applying to Akdeniz University, where the entrance exam regulations are paramount. The core of the challenge lies in understanding and adhering strictly to the examination's procedural guidelines, particularly concerning the use of external resources. Misinterpreting or disregarding these rules can lead to disqualification, highlighting the need for meticulous attention to detail and a clear understanding of the examination's jurisdiction. The correct approach involves recognizing that the Akdeniz University entrance exam has its own specific set of rules and regulations that govern candidate conduct. This approach prioritizes adherence to these established guidelines, which typically prohibit the use of any unauthorized materials or external assistance during the examination. This is justified by the fundamental principle of academic integrity and fairness, ensuring that all candidates are assessed on their own knowledge and abilities under standardized conditions. The exam's regulatory framework, as defined by Akdeniz University, is the sole authority in this context. An incorrect approach would be to assume that general exam-taking strategies or rules from other institutions apply. This is a failure because it disregards the absolute priority of the specified exam's jurisdiction. For instance, if a candidate believes that certain types of notes are permissible based on prior experiences or general academic norms, but the Akdeniz University entrance exam explicitly forbids them, this constitutes a direct violation of the specific regulatory framework. Another incorrect approach is to rely on informal advice or assumptions about what might be overlooked by invigilators. This is ethically unsound and procedurally risky, as it undermines the integrity of the examination process and demonstrates a lack of respect for the established rules. Such actions can be construed as an attempt to gain an unfair advantage, violating the principle of equal opportunity for all candidates. Professionals in examination settings must adopt a decision-making process that begins with a thorough understanding of the specific rules and regulations governing the event. This involves actively seeking out and consulting the official examination guidelines provided by the organizing institution. When faced with ambiguity, the professional approach is to seek clarification from authorized personnel rather than making assumptions. The guiding principle should always be adherence to the letter and spirit of the regulations, prioritizing fairness, integrity, and the validity of the assessment process. Question 8. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the current Akdeniz University entrance examination process is perceived by some applicants and faculty as inefficient and lacking transparency in certain administrative stages. The university administration is considering ways to optimize this process. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical considerations for university entrance examinations in Turkey? Option A. Immediately implement a simplified application system and a new scoring method based on the most frequent suggestions from applicant feedback to expedite the process. Option B. Prioritize reducing the administrative costs associated with the examination by outsourcing certain functions to external vendors without a detailed assessment of their impact on the integrity of the exam. Option C. Focus on addressing the concerns of the most vocal faculty members by altering the examination content and format to their preferred style, without consulting broader academic committees or applicant groups. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the current examination administration procedures, gather data on perceived inefficiencies, and propose changes that are evaluated for their impact on fairness, security, and compliance with Akdeniz University's examination regulations and relevant YO-K guidelines, followed by formal approval. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of the current examination administration procedures, gather data on perceived inefficiencies, and propose changes that are evaluated for their impact on fairness, security, and compliance with Akdeniz University's examination regulations and relevant YO-K guidelines, followed by formal approval. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in university administration where diverse stakeholder expectations regarding the entrance exam process need to be managed. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficiency and fairness with the specific regulatory and ethical obligations governing university entrance examinations in Turkey, as mandated by Akdeniz University's internal regulations and potentially broader YO-K, Council of Higher Education, guidelines. Misinterpreting or misapplying these regulations can lead to legal challenges, reputational damage, and a compromised admissions process. The pressure to implement changes quickly, driven by feedback, necessitates a careful, evidence-based approach that prioritizes compliance and academic integrity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the current entrance examination process, focusing on identifying specific bottlenecks or areas of concern raised by stakeholders. This review must be conducted in alignment with Akdeniz University's established examination procedures and relevant Turkish higher education regulations. The process should involve data collection on exam administration, candidate experience, and faculty input. Any proposed changes must then be evaluated for their impact on fairness, accessibility, security, and adherence to academic standards. Crucially, any modifications must be formally approved through the university's established governance structures, ensuring transparency and accountability. This methodical, compliance-focused approach safeguards the integrity of the examination process and upholds the university's commitment to fair admissions, as expected under Turkish educational law and university statutes. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing changes based solely on the most vocal stakeholder group, without a comprehensive review risks overlooking critical regulatory requirements or negatively impacting other stakeholder groups. This could lead to a process that is perceived as biased or unfair, potentially violating principles of equal opportunity in education. Making immediate, sweeping changes without understanding the root cause of the feedback or assessing the impact on the examination's validity and reliability is a significant procedural failure. This approach bypasses the necessary due diligence and could introduce new problems while attempting to solve existing ones, contravening the principles of sound administrative practice and regulatory compliance. Focusing only on cost reduction without considering the impact on the quality, security, and fairness of the examination process is ethically questionable and potentially non-compliant. Entrance examinations are designed to assess academic merit, and any changes that compromise this assessment for financial reasons would be a direct violation of the university's educational mission and regulatory obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in university administration must adopt a structured decision-making process when faced with stakeholder feedback concerning critical processes like entrance examinations. This process should begin with a thorough understanding of the feedback and its context. Next, it requires an in-depth review of all applicable regulations, university policies, and best practices relevant to the specific jurisdiction, Akdeniz University and Turkish higher education. The impact of any proposed changes must be assessed against these frameworks, considering fairness, validity, reliability, and accessibility. Finally, decisions should be made through established university governance channels, ensuring transparency, accountability, and adherence to legal and ethical standards. Question 9. Process analysis reveals that the Akdeniz University entrance exam application system experiences significant delays and a high rate of incomplete applications during the initial registration period. Which of the following strategies best addresses these issues while adhering to university entrance exam regulations and promoting equitable access for all prospective students? Option A, significantly shortening the overall application submission window to create a sense of urgency and encourage prompt completion. Option B, implementing a phased application submission schedule based on applicants' high school graduation year to distribute the load. Option C, introducing a mandatory pre-application online assessment to filter candidates before they can access the main application form. Option D, conducting a comprehensive review of the online application form's user interface and clarity, alongside enhancing server capacity and providing multi-channel applicant support. Correct answer is B, implementing a phased application submission schedule based on applicants' high school graduation year to distribute the load. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's need for efficient resource allocation and the ethical obligation to ensure all eligible candidates have a fair opportunity to participate in the entrance exam. The University Entrance Exam Regulations, as stipulated by Akdeniz University's internal guidelines and relevant Turkish higher education laws, mandate transparency and equitable access. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing process improvements that enhance efficiency without inadvertently creating barriers or disadvantages for any applicant group. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the current application and registration process, focusing on identifying bottlenecks and areas of potential inefficiency. This includes analyzing data on application completion rates, common errors, and the time taken for each stage. Based on this analysis, targeted improvements can be made, such as simplifying online forms, providing clearer instructions, offering more accessible support channels for applicants, and optimizing the server capacity during peak application periods. This approach aligns with the principles of good governance and administrative fairness, ensuring that the process is both effective and equitable, as required by university regulations and the overarching principles of educational access in Turkey. An incorrect approach would be to implement changes based solely on anecdotal evidence or without a thorough data-driven analysis. For instance, drastically reducing the application window without considering the diverse geographical locations and internet access capabilities of potential applicants could lead to a significant number of eligible candidates being unable to apply, violating the principle of equitable access. Another incorrect approach would be to introduce complex new technological requirements for the application process without providing adequate training or support, potentially disenfranchising applicants who are less technologically proficient. Such actions would contravene the spirit and letter of university regulations that aim to ensure a fair and inclusive examination process. Professionals tasked with optimizing university entrance exam processes should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes data-driven insights, stakeholder consultation, including student representatives and administrative staff, and a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape. This involves 1. Defining clear objectives for process improvement, aligned with university goals and regulatory requirements. 2. Gathering and analyzing relevant data to identify specific areas for improvement. 3. Developing and evaluating potential solutions, considering their impact on efficiency, fairness, and accessibility. 4. Implementing chosen solutions with clear communication and support mechanisms. 5. Monitoring the effectiveness of implemented changes and making further adjustments as needed. Question 10. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of incomplete documentation for international applicants, and the potential impact of admitting unqualified students is high. An applicant's submitted transcript from a foreign institution appears to have a discrepancy in the grading scale conversion compared to the university standard. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Akdeniz University Admissions Committee? Option A. Request the applicant to retake certain foundational courses to demonstrate their competency, regardless of the transcript's accuracy. Option B. Initiate a thorough investigation by contacting the applicant for clarification and verifying the transcript's authenticity and grading scale with the issuing institution before making a final decision. Option C. Proceed with admitting the applicant after a preliminary review, assuming the discrepancy is a minor administrative oversight. Option D. Reject the applicant immediately due to the apparent discrepancy, to avoid any potential future issues. The correct answer is C. Proceed with admitting the applicant after a preliminary review, assuming the discrepancy is a minor administrative oversight. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the practicalities of managing student admissions under potentially ambiguous circumstances. The core tension lies in interpreting and applying the university's admission regulations when faced with incomplete or potentially misleading information. Careful judgment is required to ensure fairness to all applicants while upholding the standards set by Akdeniz University. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation and verification of the applicant's academic records before making a final admission decision. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and transparency expected in academic admissions processes. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit of Akdeniz University's admission regulations, which implicitly require accurate and verifiable documentation for all applicants. By seeking clarification from the applicant and the previous institution, the admissions committee demonstrates a commitment to making informed decisions based on factual evidence, thereby preventing potential misrepresentation and ensuring that only qualified candidates are admitted. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of admitting students who do not meet the established criteria, safeguarding the university's academic reputation. An incorrect approach that involves immediate rejection based solely on the initial discrepancy fails to acknowledge the possibility of administrative errors or misunderstandings. This approach bypasses the opportunity for clarification and could unfairly disadvantage a deserving applicant. It neglects the principle of procedural fairness, which dictates that individuals should have a chance to explain or rectify apparent issues with their documentation. Another incorrect approach, which is to admit the student without further inquiry, is professionally unacceptable because it disregards the potential for academic misconduct or misrepresentation. This action undermines the integrity of the admission process and could lead to the enrollment of students who do not possess the required qualifications, thereby compromising the academic standards of Akdeniz University. It also sets a dangerous precedent, suggesting that incomplete or questionable documentation is acceptable, which is contrary to the foundational principles of academic admissions. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a systematic review of the applicant's file, identification of any discrepancies or missing information, and a clear protocol for seeking clarification. This protocol should include contacting the applicant directly and, if necessary, the previous educational institution. The decision should be based on verified information and in strict adherence to Akdeniz University's admission policies and ethical guidelines for academic institutions. Question 11. The performance metrics show a significant increase in the average time taken to process undergraduate applications compared to the previous academic year. The admissions committee is under pressure to reduce this processing time to improve applicant satisfaction and streamline departmental workload. Considering Akdeniz University's commitment to fair and transparent admissions, which of the following strategies would be the most appropriate for addressing this performance gap? Option A. Focusing solely on increasing the number of temporary staff assigned to application processing without addressing the underlying procedural inefficiencies. Option B. Conducting a thorough analysis of the current application workflow to identify specific bottlenecks, gathering feedback from admissions staff, and proposing phased, compliant process improvements based on this data. Option C. Prioritizing the reduction of document verification steps, even if it means slightly relaxing the stringency of checks, to expedite the overall processing timeline. Option D. Implementing a new, fully automated application review system immediately, without prior pilot testing or comprehensive review of its compatibility with existing data management protocols. The correct answer is D. Implementing a new, fully automated application review system immediately, without prior pilot testing or comprehensive review of its compatibility with existing data management protocols. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the need to balance efficiency gains with the integrity of the university's admissions process, as governed by Akdeniz University's internal regulations and the Turkish Council of Higher Education (YÖRK) guidelines. The pressure to optimize performance metrics, such as application processing time, must not compromise fairness, accuracy, or adherence to established procedures. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement improvements that are both effective and compliant. The correct approach involves a systematic review of existing processes to identify bottlenecks and inefficiencies, followed by the development and implementation of targeted, data-driven solutions that are validated against university regulations and YO-K directives. This approach is right because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the current state before proposing changes, ensuring that any optimizations are grounded in evidence and align with the overarching goals of providing a fair and efficient admissions experience. Specifically, it adheres to the principles of good governance and administrative best practices mandated by YO-K, which emphasize transparency, fairness, and the efficient use of resources within higher education institutions. By focusing on process optimization that respects these guidelines, the university upholds its commitment to academic integrity and equitable access. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid implementation of new software without adequate testing or stakeholder consultation fails to consider the potential for unintended consequences, such as data errors or exclusion of eligible candidates, which would violate the principles of fairness and accuracy. Another incorrect approach that bypasses established approval channels for process changes risks noncompliance with internal university policies and YO-K regulations, potentially leading to procedural invalidity and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness in reviewing applicant documents could result in incorrect assessments, undermining the integrity of the admissions process and violating the ethical obligation to treat all applicants equitably. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the objectives and constraints, including regulatory requirements. This is followed by a comprehensive analysis of the current situation, identification of potential solutions, rigorous evaluation of these solutions against both performance goals and compliance standards, and finally, phased implementation with continuous monitoring and feedback. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, ethical, and aligned with institutional and regulatory mandates. Question 12. Quality control measures reveal that the current manual grading process for the Akdeniz University entrance exam is time-consuming and prone to minor human error. To address this, a proposal has been made to introduce an automated grading system. Which of the following represents the most appropriate process optimization strategy in this context? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive pilot program of the automated grading system on a subset of subjects, rigorously comparing its accuracy and efficiency against manual grading, and ensuring full compliance with data security and privacy regulations before wider adoption. Option B. Prioritize the cost-effectiveness of the automated system, making the switch without extensive validation, as long as it appears to be faster than the current manual method. Option C. Rely on feedback from a few experienced graders to quickly transition to the automated system, assuming their positive experiences will translate to overall success. Option D. Immediately implement the automated grading system across all subjects to maximize efficiency gains. The correct answer is D. Immediately implement the automated grading system across all subjects to maximize efficiency gains. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient process optimization with the imperative to adhere to the specific regulatory framework governing university entrance exams in Turkey, as defined by Akdeniz University's internal guidelines and relevant national educational legislation. The pressure to improve efficiency must not compromise the integrity, fairness, and transparency of the examination process, which are paramount for maintaining public trust and ensuring equitable opportunities for all candidates. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the existing examination process to identify bottlenecks and areas for improvement, followed by the development and implementation of changes that are rigorously tested and validated against established quality standards and regulatory requirements. This approach prioritizes a data-driven and evidence-based methodology, ensuring that any proposed optimizations are not only effective in terms of efficiency, but also compliant with all applicable rules and ethical considerations. Specifically, this aligns with the principles of good governance and administrative best practices expected of educational institutions, emphasizing thoroughness and adherence to established procedures before making significant changes. An incorrect approach would be to implement changes based on anecdotal evidence or without proper validation. For instance, rushing to adopt a new digital scoring system without pilot testing or ensuring its compatibility with existing secure data handling protocols would be a significant regulatory failure. This could lead to data breaches, scoring errors, or a lack of audit trails, all of which violate the principles of data security and accuracy mandated by educational regulations. Another incorrect approach would be to bypass the established approval processes for procedural changes, thereby undermining institutional governance and potentially introducing unvetted risks into the examination system. Such actions demonstrate a disregard for the established legal and administrative framework, prioritizing speed over compliance and integrity. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a structured decision-making process. This involves first clearly defining the problem or opportunity for improvement. Second, they should thoroughly research and understand all relevant regulations, guidelines, and institutional policies. Third, they should brainstorm potential solutions, evaluating each against the criteria of effectiveness, efficiency, compliance, and ethical soundness. Fourth, they should select the most appropriate solution, develop a detailed implementation plan, and conduct pilot testing or validation as necessary. Finally, they should ensure all changes are properly documented and communicated, and that ongoing monitoring is in place to assess their impact and ensure continued compliance. Question 13. The control framework reveals that the Akdeniz University entrance exam admission process requires strict verification of all submitted academic transcripts and prerequisite course completion certificates. During the peak onboarding period, the admissions office faces a backlog, and a candidate presents a transcript with a minor discrepancy that, if corrected, would delay their enrollment. The admissions officer is aware of the candidate's strong academic record in other areas. What is the most appropriate course of action to maintain regulatory compliance and operational integrity? Option A. Reject the candidate's application immediately due to the transcript discrepancy, adhering strictly to the initial documentation requirements without any flexibility. Option B. Accept the candidate's application and proceed with enrollment, assuming the discrepancy is minor and unlikely to affect their overall eligibility, given their strong performance in other subjects. Option C. Proceed with the admission of the candidate after obtaining a written commitment from them to rectify the transcript discrepancy within a specified, short time frame, while flagging the file for follow-up. Option D. Request an official clarification from the examination board regarding the acceptable tolerance for minor transcript discrepancies before making a decision. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the admission of the candidate after obtaining a written commitment from them to rectify the transcript discrepancy within a specified, short time frame, while flagging the file for follow-up. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the university's immediate need for efficient student onboarding and the imperative to adhere strictly to the Akdeniz University entrance exam regulations. The pressure to expedite processes can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of the admission system. Careful judgment is required to balance operational efficiency with regulatory compliance, ensuring that all admitted students meet the established criteria without exception. The correct approach involves a systematic verification of all submitted documents against the official requirements stipulated by the Akdeniz University entrance exam regulations. This process ensures that each student's application is evaluated fairly and consistently, upholding the integrity of the admission process. Specifically, this approach aligns with the regulatory framework's emphasis on transparency, fairness, and the accurate assessment of candidate qualifications. By meticulously cross-referencing each document with the established criteria, the university demonstrates its commitment to admitting only those candidates who have successfully met all prerequisites, thereby safeguarding the academic standards and reputation of the institution. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy by accepting incomplete documentation for expediency would violate the core principles of the Akdeniz University entrance exam regulations. Such a failure would undermine the fairness of the admission process, potentially admitting unqualified candidates and disadvantaging those who diligently followed the prescribed procedures. This directly contravenes the regulatory requirement for comprehensive and accurate documentation as a basis for admission. Another incorrect approach, which involves making exceptions to the documentation requirements based on informal assurances or perceived potential of a candidate, represents a significant ethical and regulatory breach. This introduces subjectivity and bias into the admission process, deviating from the objective criteria set forth by the exam regulations. It creates an uneven playing field and erodes trust in the university's admission system. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the governing regulations and a commitment to their strict application. Professionals must prioritize adherence to the established rules and guidelines, even when faced with pressure for faster processing. When in doubt about the interpretation or application of a regulation, seeking clarification from the relevant university authorities or the examination board is crucial. The ultimate goal is to ensure that all decisions are defensible, transparent, and in full compliance with the regulatory framework, thereby maintaining the credibility and fairness of the academic institution. Question 14. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive review of the Akdeniz University entrance exams administrative and assessment processes to enhance efficiency and effectiveness. Considering the university's commitment to fair and rigorous evaluation, which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of process optimization within the established regulatory framework for university entrance examinations in Turkey? Option A. Reducing the total number of questions in the examination by 20% to shorten the administration time, assuming this will lead to a more efficient process without impacting the assessment's core objectives. Option B. Implementing a data-driven analysis of current examination procedures to identify and address specific bottlenecks and areas for improvement, ensuring that any proposed changes maintain the academic integrity and fairness of the assessment as per Akdeniz University's academic regulations. Option C. Prioritizing the speed of question paper distribution and collection over the detailed review of question clarity and relevance, aiming to complete the examination process as quickly as possible. Option D. Introducing a new, untested question format for a significant portion of the exam to gauge student adaptability, without prior consultation or pilot testing with the university's academic board. Correct answer is B. Implementing a data-driven analysis of current examination procedures to identify and address specific bottlenecks and areas for improvement, ensuring that any proposed changes maintain the academic integrity and fairness of the assessment as per Akdeniz University's academic regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the university entrance exam process, governed by Akdeniz University's specific regulations and guidelines, demands adherence to established procedures for fairness and integrity. Misinterpreting or deviating from these established processes can lead to procedural errors, potentially invalidating results or creating grounds for appeals, thereby undermining the credibility of the examination. Careful judgment is required to ensure all actions align with the university's stated objectives for the entrance exam, which typically prioritize meritocracy and equal opportunity. The correct approach involves a systematic review and optimization of existing examination processes, focusing on identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies that do not compromise the academic rigor or fairness of the exam. This aligns with the principles of good governance and administrative efficiency expected of an academic institution. Specifically, it requires understanding the Akdeniz University's internal regulations concerning examination administration, which would likely emphasize clarity, transparency, and adherence to established timelines. The goal is to enhance the operational aspects of the exam without altering its fundamental assessment criteria or introducing any bias, thereby upholding the integrity of the entrance process as mandated by the university's academic and administrative policies. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on reducing the number of questions, without a thorough analysis of their impact on assessment validity, would be professionally unacceptable. This is because the Akdeniz University's examination regulations would mandate that the exam accurately measures the required knowledge and skills for admission. Arbitrarily reducing content without ensuring comprehensive assessment would violate this principle. Another incorrect approach, which involves introducing new question formats without prior approval and pilot testing according to university guidelines, would also be problematic. This could lead to unforeseen issues with scoring, student comprehension, and comparability of results, contravening the university's need for standardized and reliable assessment methods. Furthermore, an approach that prioritizes speed of administration over the thoroughness of question review and validation would fail to meet the implicit requirement of ensuring the quality and fairness of the examination, as expected under the university's academic standards. Professionals tasked with optimizing such processes should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the governing regulations and objectives of the Akdeniz University entrance exam. This involves consulting internal policy documents, academic council decisions, and any relevant directives from the Ministry of National Education, if applicable to university entrance exams in Turkey. The next step is to identify specific areas for improvement through data analysis, e.g., student feedback, administrative logs, and expert consultation. Proposed changes must then be evaluated against the established regulatory framework for their impact on fairness, validity, reliability, and efficiency. Finally, any implemented changes should be monitored and assessed for their effectiveness, with a commitment to iterative improvement within the established legal and ethical boundaries. Question 15. Process analysis reveals that the Akdeniz University Entrance Exam Admissions Committee is considering ways to expedite the review of a large volume of applications. One proposed method involves categorizing applicants based on their high school performance trends, with a faster review for those showing consistent high achievement, while a more detailed review is reserved for others. Another suggestion is to implement a preliminary potential assessment based on extracurricular activities and personal statements, which would influence the order of review. A third approach advocates for a strict, sequential review of all applications strictly according to the established criteria, regardless of volume, ensuring each is evaluated against the defined academic and examination score thresholds. Option A. Create a tiered review system where applicants with lower initial scores are reviewed first to identify potential underdogs. Option B. Implement a preliminary potential assessment based on extracurricular activities and personal statements to influence the order of review. Option C. Categorize applicants based on high school performance trends for faster review of those with consistent high achievement. Option D. Implement a strict, sequential review of all applications according to the established criteria, regardless of volume. Correct answer is D. Implement a strict, sequential review of all applications according to the established criteria, regardless of volume. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's need for efficient student admissions with the ethical obligation to ensure a fair and transparent process, adhering strictly to the Akdeniz University entrance exam regulations. The core of the challenge lies in interpreting and applying the established admission criteria without introducing bias or compromising the integrity of the examination process. The correct approach involves a systematic review of all submitted applications against the documented admission criteria, ensuring that each applicant is evaluated solely on the merits of their qualifications as defined by the exam regulations. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant because it upholds the principles of fairness, objectivity, and equal opportunity, which are fundamental to any university entrance examination. The Akdeniz University entrance exam regulations, by their nature, are designed to provide a standardized and equitable pathway for admission. Deviating from these established criteria, even with the intention of improving efficiency, risks introducing subjective judgment and potential discrimination, thereby violating the spirit and letter of the regulations. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness by pre-screening applications based on perceived potential rather than strict adherence to stated criteria is ethically flawed. This introduces an element of subjective bias, as perceived potential is not a defined or measurable criterion within the exam's regulatory framework. Such an approach could lead to the exclusion of deserving candidates who meet all objective requirements but do not fit a subjective profile, thus violating the principle of equal opportunity. Another incorrect approach that involves creating a new, unannounced scoring rubric for certain applicant groups, even if intended to streamline the process, is a direct violation of the Akdeniz University entrance exam regulations. This constitutes a lack of transparency and fairness, as all applicants must be assessed under the same, publicly communicated standards. Introducing ad hoc criteria undermines the integrity of the entire admission process and erodes trust in the university's evaluation system. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the governing regulations. Professionals must first identify the specific rule and guidelines applicable to the task. Then, they should evaluate proposed actions against these regulations, considering potential ethical implications such as fairness, transparency, and non-discrimination. If a proposed action appears to deviate from or conflict with the regulations, the professional must seek clarification or propose alternative solutions that strictly adhere to the established framework. In this case, the focus should always be on applying the existing, approved criteria consistently and impartially to all applicants. Question 16. Governance review demonstrates that the Akdeniz University's undergraduate admissions process is experiencing significant delays, impacting applicant experience and administrative workload. To address this, several optimization strategies are being considered. Which strategy best balances efficiency gains with adherence to the regulatory framework of Turkish higher education and Akdeniz University's internal policies? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive audit of current admission workflows, identify specific procedural bottlenecks, and propose targeted digital enhancements and policy adjustments that are explicitly reviewed and approved by the University Senate and Legal Council for compliance with the Turkish higher education law and internal regulations before implementation. Option B. Prioritize cost reduction by outsourcing a significant portion of the application screening to a third-party vendor without a thorough review of their compliance with Turkish data privacy laws and university admission standards. Option C. Immediately deploy a new state-of-the-art digital admissions platform that automates all stages of the application review and selection process, assuming it will inherently improve efficiency. Option D. Implement rapid, across-the-board automation of all admission tasks, focusing solely on speed and reducing manual intervention, without a detailed assessment of how these changes align with the qualitative assessment criteria mandated by the higher education law. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive audit of current admission workflows, identify specific procedural bottlenecks, and propose targeted digital enhancements and policy adjustments that are explicitly reviewed and approved by the University Senate and Legal Council for compliance with the Turkish higher education law and internal regulations before implementation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in university administration where efficiency improvements are sought, but the implementation must strictly adhere to the Akdeniz University's internal regulations and the overarching principles of the Turkish higher education law. The challenge lies in balancing the desire for process optimization with the imperative to maintain academic integrity, fairness in admissions, and compliance with established legal and ethical frameworks. A hasty or poorly considered optimization could inadvertently create loopholes, disadvantage certain applicant groups, or violate procedural fairness, leading to reputational damage and potential legal challenges. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, phased review of existing admission processes, identifying bottlenecks and areas for improvement, and then proposing changes that are explicitly vetted against Akdeniz University's internal regulations and the Turkish higher education law. This approach prioritizes compliance and fairness. By involving relevant stakeholders, conducting pilot testing, and ensuring transparency, it mitigates risks of unintended consequences and ensures that any optimization serves to enhance, rather than undermine, the integrity of the admission system. This aligns with the principles of good governance and administrative law, which demand that public institutions operate within their legal mandates and with due regard for fairness and equity. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a new, unvetted digital platform without a comprehensive review of its compatibility with existing university regulations and the Turkish higher education law is a significant regulatory failure. It risks introducing non-compliant procedures or data handling practices. Automating the entire selection process without human oversight or clear criteria, as suggested by another approach, bypasses established qualitative assessment methods and could lead to arbitrary decisions, violating principles of fairness and potentially the spirit of the higher education law regarding holistic candidate evaluation. Focusing solely on speed and cost reduction without considering the impact on the fairness and transparency of the admissions process, as a third approach might suggest, is an ethical failure. It prioritizes economic efficiency over the fundamental right of applicants to a fair and equitable assessment, which is a core tenet of educational institutions operating under public law. Professional reasoning. Professionals in university administration must adopt a systematic and compliance-driven approach to process optimization. This involves 1. Understanding the existing regulatory landscape, Deep familiarity with Akdeniz University's internal regulations and the relevant articles of the Turkish higher education law is paramount. 2. Risk assessment. Identifying potential legal, ethical, and operational risks associated with any proposed change. 3. Stakeholder consultation. Engaging with faculty, administrative staff, and potentially student representatives to gather input and ensure buy-in. 4. Phased implementation and testing. Introducing changes incrementally and testing their effectiveness and compliance before full rollout. 5. Continuous monitoring and evaluation. Regularly reviewing the optimized processes to ensure ongoing compliance and effectiveness. Question 17. Benchmark analysis indicates that the Akdeniz University entrance exam process has experienced minor delays in candidate verification and result tabulation in recent years. Considering the university's commitment to academic integrity and the regulatory framework set forth by the Turkish Council of Higher Education, YÖRK, for university entrance examinations, which of the following approaches best addresses these identified process inefficiencies while upholding the highest standards of fairness and security? Option A. Focus solely on increasing the number of administrative staff involved in verification and tabulation, believing that additional human resources will automatically accelerate the process, without investigating the root causes of delays or the effectiveness of current procedures. Option B. Immediately implement a cutting-edge digital verification system and advanced statistical software for result tabulation, assuming that newer technology will inherently resolve all existing inefficiencies without requiring extensive process analysis or staff retraining. Option C. Prioritize the reduction of verification steps to speed up the process, accepting a slightly higher margin of potential error in candidate identification and result accuracy to meet time targets, as minor discrepancies are unlikely to significantly impact overall outcomes. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the entire candidate verification and result tabulation workflow, gathering data on each stage's efficiency and error rates, and then propose evidence-based modifications to streamline processes, enhance security checks, and improve technological integration, ensuring all changes align with YÖK guidelines and university examination protocols. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the entire candidate verification and result tabulation workflow, gathering data on each stage's efficiency and error rates, and then propose evidence-based modifications to streamline processes, enhance security checks, and improve technological integration, ensuring all changes align with YÖK guidelines and university examination protocols. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the practicalities of managing a large-scale entrance examination. The pressure to ensure fairness and prevent any form of academic misconduct, while also optimizing the logistical processes for thousands of applicants, demands careful judgment. The university must adhere strictly to its own established examination regulations and the overarching principles of fair assessment as mandated by the Turkish Council of Higher Education, YÖRK, Regulations for University Entrance Exams. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the existing examination process, identifying bottlenecks and areas prone to error or misconduct, and then proposing targeted, evidence-based improvements. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement and operational efficiency, which are implicitly expected in the management of public examinations. Specifically, this approach respects the regulatory framework by ensuring that any proposed changes are evaluated for their impact on fairness, security, and the integrity of the examination process, as well as their feasibility within the university's resources and existing guidelines. It prioritizes data-driven decision-making, ensuring that changes are not arbitrary, but are based on identified weaknesses. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on implementing new technologies without a thorough understanding of their compatibility with existing security protocols, or without adequate staff training risks introducing new vulnerabilities or disenfranchising certain applicant groups. This could violate YÖK regulations concerning the standardized administration of examinations and the principle of equal opportunity for all candidates. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of processing over the thoroughness of verification procedures could compromise the integrity of the results, leading to potential challenges and undermining public trust in the examination process. This would be a direct contravention of the ethical obligation to ensure a fair and accurate assessment. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal opinions rather than objective data for process changes lacks the rigor required for managing a high-stakes examination and could lead to ineffective or even detrimental modifications, failing to meet the standards of responsible administrative practice. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the objectives and constraints, followed by a comprehensive assessment of the current situation using objective data. Potential solutions should then be evaluated against established regulatory requirements, ethical principles, and practical feasibility. Pilot testing and stakeholder consultation are crucial steps before full implementation. Question 18. Process analysis reveals that the current Akdeniz University entrance exam application submission process is experiencing significant delays, leading to a backlog of incomplete applications and increased administrative burden. This situation necessitates a review of the existing workflow to identify areas for improvement while strictly adhering to the Akdeniz University entrance exams regulatory framework. Option A. Introducing a mandatory in-person submission requirement for all applications to expedite verification and reduce the risk of digital errors, regardless of applicant location or accessibility. Option B. Implementing a phased digital transformation of the application submission process, starting with a pilot program for specific departments, ensuring robust data security and accessibility for all applicants, and conducting thorough regulatory impact assessments before full rollout. Option C. Streamlining the review of supporting documents by accepting photocopies without official verification to speed up processing times. Option D. Prioritizing applications from candidates who submit their documents earliest without a comprehensive review of all submitted materials to clear the backlog quickly. The correct answer is B. Implementing a phased digital transformation of the application submission process, starting with a pilot program for specific departments, ensuring robust data security and accessibility for all applicants, and conducting thorough regulatory impact assessments before full rollout. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's need for efficient student admissions with the ethical obligation to ensure a fair and transparent process, adhering strictly to the Akdeniz University entrance exam regulations. The core of the challenge lies in identifying and implementing process improvements without compromising the integrity or accessibility of the exam for all prospective students. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the existing admissions workflow, identifying bottlenecks and areas for potential enhancement, and then proposing changes that are aligned with the Akdeniz University entrance exam's stated objectives and regulatory framework. This includes ensuring that any proposed changes do not inadvertently create barriers for certain groups of applicants or deviate from the established examination procedures. The regulatory justification stems from the overarching principle of fairness and equal opportunity embedded within university entrance examination guidelines, which mandate that processes be transparent, equitable, and administered according to established rules. An incorrect approach would be to implement changes based solely on anecdotal feedback or without a thorough understanding of the regulatory implications. For instance, introducing a new, unvetted digital submission system without ensuring its accessibility to all applicants, regardless of their technical proficiency or access to technology, would be a regulatory failure. This could violate principles of equal access and potentially disadvantage students from less privileged backgrounds, contradicting the spirit of inclusive admissions. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed of processing over the thorough verification of applicant credentials, which could lead to errors and undermine the credibility of the admissions process, a direct contravention of the exam's integrity requirements. Professionals tasked with optimizing such processes should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the governing regulations. This involves mapping the current process, identifying potential risks and opportunities for improvement, and then evaluating proposed changes against the regulatory framework and ethical considerations. Pilot testing of any significant changes, gathering feedback from stakeholders, and ensuring that all modifications are documented and approved according to university policy are crucial steps in maintaining a robust and compliant admissions process. Question 19. Process analysis reveals that the current student registration for the Akdeniz University entrance exam is time-consuming due to manual verification of identification documents against pre-registered data. To expedite this, a proposal is made to implement a system that relies on facial recognition technology for candidate identification, bypassing the need for physical document checks at the registration desk. Assuming the technology's accuracy is high, which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework for the Akdeniz University entrance exam? Option A. Disregard the regulations and implement the facial recognition system, prioritizing speed and perceived technological advancement over established procedures. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the Akdeniz University entrance exam regulations to determine if alternative identification methods are permissible, and if so, propose a compliant facial recognition integration or enhancement to the existing verification process. Option C. Implement the facial recognition system immediately to improve efficiency, as the technology is deemed accurate and will speed up the process for students. Option D. Proceed with the facial recognition system, but only after obtaining informal verbal approval from a senior administrator who believes it will be beneficial. The correct answer is C. Implement the facial recognition system immediately to improve efficiency, as the technology is deemed accurate and will speed up the process for students. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's need for efficient student onboarding with the absolute priority of adhering to the Akdeniz University entrance exam regulations. Misinterpreting or circumventing these regulations, even with the intention of improving a process, can lead to severe consequences, including invalidating exam results or facing disciplinary action. The core of the challenge lies in understanding that process optimization must occur with an asterisk the established legal and regulatory framework, not in opposition to it. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the Akdeniz University entrance exam regulations, specifically those pertaining to candidate identification, and the integrity of the examination process. This approach prioritizes compliance by ensuring that any proposed changes to the registration process are first vetted against these regulations. If the regulations mandate a specific method for candidate verification, e.g., physical ID check against registration data, then any process optimization must accommodate this requirement. The ethical justification stems from upholding the fairness and validity of the entrance exam, ensuring all candidates are treated equally, and that the integrity of the selection process is maintained. This aligns with the university's commitment to academic integrity and fair admission practices. An incorrect approach that bypasses the established identification protocols, even if it speeds up the process, fails to comply with the Akdeniz University entrance exam regulations. Such a failure directly undermines the security and validity of the exam, potentially allowing individuals who are not properly registered or identified to participate. This is a significant ethical and regulatory breach. Another incorrect approach that relies on assumptions about candidate identity without explicit verification, even if based on prior interactions, also violates the principle of due diligence required by examination regulations. This can lead to errors in candidate records and compromise the overall fairness of the exam. A third incorrect approach that introduces new, unapproved identification methods without consulting the relevant examination board or regulatory body is also unacceptable. This demonstrates a disregard for the established procedures and the authority responsible for setting and enforcing the exam's rules. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive review of the Akdeniz University entrance exam regulations. Any proposed process improvement must be assessed for its compliance with these specific rules. If a conflict arises, the priority must always be regulatory adherence. The next step involves consulting with the relevant university departments or examination committees responsible for overseeing the entrance exam to seek clarification or propose amendments that are compliant. This iterative process of review, consultation, and compliance ensures that operational efficiency is achieved without compromising the integrity and legality of the examination process. Question 20. Process analysis reveals that the Akdeniz University Entrance Exam Admission Committee is facing a significant backlog of applications, leading to pressure to expedite the review process. Which of the following actions best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for managing this situation? Option A. Delegating the final decision-making authority for a portion of applications to junior staff with minimal oversight to increase throughput. Option B. Implementing a multi-stage verification process where initial screening is followed by a detailed review of a statistically significant sample of applications to identify potential issues, with full verification for flagged applications. Option C. Accepting all submitted documents at face value without further cross-referencing or verification to meet the processing deadline. Option D. Prioritizing applications based on the perceived likelihood of acceptance to reduce the overall number of applications requiring full review. The correct answer is B. Implementing a multi-stage verification process where initial screening is followed by a detailed review of a statistically significant sample of applications to identify potential issues, with full verification for flagged applications. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's need for efficient student admission processes with the ethical obligation to ensure fairness and transparency, all within the specific regulatory framework of the Akdeniz University entrance exam. The pressure to process applications quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise integrity. The correct approach involves a systematic review of all submitted documents against the established criteria outlined in the Akdeniz University entrance exam regulations. This ensures that every applicant is evaluated consistently and fairly, adhering to the principles of equal opportunity and due process mandated by the exam's governing rules. This approach prioritizes accuracy and compliance, minimizing the risk of errors or bias that could lead to appeals or legal challenges. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness by only spot-checking documents would fail to uphold the regulatory requirement for comprehensive evaluation. This could lead to admitting unqualified candidates or rejecting eligible ones, violating the principles of fairness and potentially contravening specific clauses within the Akdeniz University entrance exam guidelines regarding document verification. Another incorrect approach, which involves accepting unofficial documentation without proper verification, directly contravenes the established procedures for application submission and validation as defined by the exam's regulations. This opens the door to fraudulent applications and undermines the credibility of the entire admission process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the Akdeniz University entrance exam's specific regulations and guidelines. Professionals must prioritize adherence to these rules, even under pressure for efficiency. This involves establishing clear protocols for document handling, implementing quality control measures, and fostering a culture where accuracy and ethical conduct are paramount. When faced with conflicting demands, professionals should consult the relevant regulatory documents and seek clarification from appropriate university authorities to ensure compliance.